My parents found my sister's ring in the drain, 3 years after they kicked me out for stealing it. The email from my father was brief and blunt. We needed to meet as soon as possible. It's about the ring, he wrote. Please come home. I read those words again and again, my vision blurring. My hands have gone cold, but I can feel my pulse hammering in my ears. The ring. They found the ring. After 3 years. After everything it cost me. I sink down onto the edge of my bed, the phone slipping from my fingers onto the rumpled sheets. A hot, buzzing static fills my head. They want to talk, now after all this time. Now that it's about the ring. My throat tightens as a wave of vindication and fury rises inside me, sharp and bitter. I press my palms hard against my eyes, but it doesn't stop the memories from flooding back. I can still hear my sister's scream, as if she were right here in the room. 3 years fold away in an instant, dragging me back to that afternoon when my life shattered, the day Gemma's engagement ring went missing. The afternoon it happened, I was in my bedroom, fingers absently dancing over my game controller. The house was still and sunlit. For once, I had it all to myself. Mom and Gemma were out shopping for wedding decorations, and Dad wouldn't be home from school until later. It was peaceful normal. I heard Mom and Gemma return home, their voices and laughter echoing up the stairs. I thought about going down to greet them, then decided I'd see them later. I went back to my game until, about an hour later, a piercing scream from downstairs made me drop the controller and sprint out of my room. By the time I skidded into the kitchen, Gemma was hunched over the sink, her hands plunging frantically into the dishwater and clattering dishes around. Mom hovered near the kitchen island, face pale, one hand pressed over her mouth. Shards of a broken plate littered the counter. Water gushed from the faucet, overflowing a pot in the sink. What happened? I panted, looking between them. Gemma didn't seem to hear me. She was yanking open drawers, eyes wild. Mom turned to me with a stricken expression. Gemma's ring, it's gone, she whispered. My stomach lurched. The ring, the gorgeous diamond from Gemma's fiancé Tom. It had been in his family for generations, practically an heirloom. Gemma adored that ring, flaunted it every chance she got. She would never misplace it. Gemma slammed a drawer shut, face twisted in panic. It was right here, she cried, pointing at a wet spot on the counter by the sink. I took it off to do the dishes and left it right here. Now it's gone. I glanced around, heart thudding. The counters were a mess of soap suds and dishes. Maybe it fell down? I moved toward the floor, scanning for any glint of a diamond. I barely got the words out before Gemma whirled on me. You, she snarled, eyes blazing. You were home. You were the only one here. I stared at her, uncomprehending. Gem, what are you saying? Give it back. Gemma's voice rose to a hysterical pitch that sent a shock through me. Mom flinched, tears in her eyes. My sister was looking at me like I was a stranger. Don't you dare act like you don't know. The ring, Ellie. Where is it? Her accusation was like a physical blow. I stumbled back, heart pounding. What? Gemma, I didn't take your ring. I stammered. My own voice sounded too high, thin with panic. Why would I? Because you've always been jealous of me, she hissed, eyes flashing. You hate that I have everything. A great job, a fiancé, this ring, while you have nothing. Maybe you took it to sell it for some cash, finally move out and do something with your life. I was speechless. I could only manage a faint. You can't be serious, as tears of outrage pricked my eyes. Tell me where it is, Gemma demanded, voice cracking now, her hands balled into fists at her sides. I won't be angry, I just want it back. Please, Ellie. The sudden desperation in her tone might have broken my heart, if she hadn't just accused me of something so awful. I don't have it. I shouted, my temper finally flaring through the shock. My whole body was trembling. I never touched your ring, Gemma. I never even saw you take it off. What is going on here? A new voice cut in sharply. We all turned. Dad stood in the doorway, still in the short-sleeved button-down he wore to teach, his leather briefcase in hand. He must have gotten home in the middle of the chaos. Mom rushed to his side, her face crumpling. Oh, John, she sobbed. Gemma's engagement ring is missing, and Ellie was the only one home. My father's gaze moved to me. Normally his eyes were warm and steady, the eyes of a math teacher who always said logic could solve anything. But now they were clouded with confusion and dread. Ellie, he said slowly, voice low and tight, your sister's ring is gone? And you were here alone. Yes, but Dad, I didn't take it. I protested, taking a step forward. I could hear how desperate I sounded. She did, Gemma spat. Who else could it be? It was right here and now it's gone. She pointed at the empty counter and then at me. Her voice cracked into a sob. She has some cash stashed away. I saw it in her room the other day. Dad's head whipped toward me. Cash, he asked, a hard edge to his tone. My blood turned to ice. Yeah, I have some savings, I stuttered. From my grocery store job. It's in my desk, but it has nothing to do with. How much money, Ellie? Mom asked quietly, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. Only a few $100s, I said quickly. I've been saving up for community college classes. It's my money. No one responded. Dad's jaw was clenched so tight I saw a muscle tick in his cheek. Finally he spoke, voice grim. Show me. My heart sank to my feet. Dad, come on. Show me, he repeated, steel in his voice. Hands shaking, I led them all up to my bedroom. Gemma hovered in the hallway, arms folded, while Mom and Dad crowded into my small room. The humiliation burned my cheeks as I pulled open my bottom desk drawer and took out a plain envelope from beneath a stack of old notebooks. Dad snatched it from my hand before I could speak. He peered inside. $260, he muttered to Mom. Gemma let out a bitter laugh. There. She probably sold my ring today, and that's what she got for it. That's my money. I cried, hot tears blurring my vision. I earned it bagging groceries and... Ellie. Dad's tone cut through my words like a blade. I shut up, my lip quivering. He handed the envelope to Mom and straightened, squaring his shoulders in a way I knew well. It was his disciplinarian stance. We're going to search your room, he said quietly. If you have that ring, you need to tell us now. I don't. Have. It. I enunciated each word, begging them with my eyes to believe me. But I could already see that they didn't. Dad's face was stony. Without another word, he opened my closet and began rummaging methodically, pushing aside hanging clothes. Mom pulled out my dresser drawers one by one, dumping my shirts and socks onto the floor. They moved with an almost frantic determination. I stood there in numb disbelief as my own parents tore apart my room, overturning drawers, emptying my closet, searching every inch as if I were a criminal. My childhood sanctuary became a crime scene. With each discarded item, I saw their hope of finding the ring, of my supposed guilt, flicker and fade into growing despair. After what felt like an eternity of frantic rustling and overturned furniture, Dad exhaled shakily. It's not here, he grunted at last, breaking the tense silence. Still on his knees from checking under my bed, he looked unconvinced by the lack of evidence. His eyes met Mom's. Hers were full of sorrow and confusion. She might have sold it already, Gemma whispered from the doorway. Her face was blotchy with tears, her arms hugging herself. That cash, maybe she pawned it this morning or yesterday. Maybe it's gone. No. I croaked. My throat felt raw. Gemma, how can you even think? She flinched and turned away, unable to meet my eyes. I thought I knew you, she said bitterly. Apparently I was wrong. Mom sank down on my stripped bed, clutching the envelope of my savings like it was evidence of my sins. Dad slowly stood up, his shoulders sagging as the full weight of this nightmare settled on him. He pressed his fingers to his brow. We might have to call the police, he said, voice hollow. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. Dad, please. I moved toward him, panic rising like bile. Please don't do that. I didn't do anything. You have to believe me. He wouldn't look at me. Neither would Mom. Dad cleared his throat. We'll hold off for now, he said quietly. If you come clean and return the ring. But if it's not back by the end of the week, we won't have a choice, Ellie. He swallowed hard, still not meeting my eyes. That ring is worth a lot of money. And more importantly, what you've done, his voice choked off, unable to finish. Mom finally looked up at me. I'll never forget the heartbreak on her face. How could you do this to your sister, she whispered. To us. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. There was nothing I could say. My word meant nothing to them now. I felt like a ghost in my own home. Present but utterly unseen, except as the empty space where their trust used to be. That was the day I lost my family. The week that followed was a waking nightmare. Every day, I endured the same cycle of accusations and icy silence. Over dinner, Dad's stern gaze bore into me while Mom picked at her food and quietly cried. Gemma refused to even sit at the same table. I'd hear her bedroom door slam at mealtime rather than face me. They kept hounding me again and again. Where is it? Just give it back and we can move on. The pleas would turn to demands, then threats when I refused to confess. Dad's promise to call the police hung in the air. We all knew he meant it. More than once I caught him standing by the phone, rubbing his forehead, only to storm out of the room when I continued to insist I was innocent. I barely slept. I'd lie on my bed, my sheets still stripped off and my belongings strewn around from their search, staring into the dark until sunrise. In those sleepless hours, I oscillated between fury and despair. How could my own family think me capable of something so terrible? How could they toss me aside so easily? Sometimes I fled the house and drove aimlessly for hours in the dark, screaming in my car where no one could hear me. By dawn, I'd creep back into the house exhausted and hollow. At the end of that horrible week, Mom and Dad confronted me one final time. It was a Friday evening. I stood trembling in the living room while my parents told me their decision. Mom couldn't stop crying and Dad's face was drawn tight with pain. Gemma hovered in the doorway, eyes red. We can't keep doing this, Dad said, his voice low and breaking. Your mother and I think it's best if you leave. It felt like the floor dropped out from under me. Leave. I echoed, barely breathing. I looked at Mom, hoping I'd heard wrong. We don't trust you anymore, Ellie, she whispered, twisting a tissue in her hands. How can we after this? Her voice cracked. You're our daughter and we love you, Dad added quickly, his eyes moist. But you've put an unbearable strain on this family. On Gemma. He glanced toward my sister's shadow in the doorway. Unless you come to your senses and do the right thing, we just can't have you here. It's tearing us all apart. I swayed on my feet, nausea rolling through me. I have nowhere to go, I managed. My voice sounded small and far away. Dad's expression hardened with resolve over pain. You'll have to figure something out. We'll give you a couple of days to make arrangements and pack your things. Mom sobbed into her tissue. Please understand, she whispered. Maybe some time apart will make you realize how much this has hurt everyone. I looked between them, heart pounding in disbelief. These were my parents, the people who had raised me, loved me. Or so I thought. Now they could hardly even look at me. I had one last shred of hope that someone might stand up for me. I turned toward Gemma, who lingered in the hallway. Gemma, I pleaded, voice breaking, you know me. You know I wouldn't. She refused to meet my gaze. She stayed silent. A cold, desolate feeling crept over me. It was truly 3 against 1. I was alone. 2 days later, I stood by the front door of the only home I'd ever known, a lumpy duffel bag at my feet and a backpack slung over my shoulder. It was a warm June morning. The sunlight and cheerful bird songs outside felt perversely normal, as if the world hadn't ended for me. Mom hovered a few feet away, wringing her hands. She kept whispering, I'm sorry, under her breath, though I wasn't sure if she meant for me or for herself. She'd packed me a small Tupperware of sandwiches for the road, as if I were just going on a trip, as if that could make this better. Dad stood stiffly beside her, arms crossed, his eyes red like he hadn't slept. I knew I hadn't. He didn't say a word. Gemma was nowhere to be seen. She hadn't come out of her room all morning. Maybe she couldn't face the sight of me leaving, or maybe she just didn't care. Part of me wanted to shout up the stairs at her, to force her to watch what she'd done, but I didn't have the energy or the heart. I picked up my duffel, my hands trembling. Mom stepped forward like she might hug me, then stopped, uncertain. Dad exhaled through his nose, still looking away. Not a single goodbye from either of them. So I opened the door. As I walked out onto the porch, I glanced up instinctively toward Gemma's bedroom window. To my surprise, I saw her there behind the glass, half hidden by the curtain. Her face was pale. Our eyes met for just a second. I thought, maybe imagined. I saw a flicker of regret in her expression, a hesitation. But then she drew back, the curtain falling closed once more. I waited a moment, almost expecting her to suddenly burst out the front door, to shout that she was sorry, that they'd made a mistake. But nothing happened. The house remained silent behind me. With a ragged breath, I turned and walked down the steps. My parents stayed in the doorway, watching me leave as if I were a stranger. I paused at the end of the driveway, one final surge of despair threatening to break me. But I swallowed it down and forced myself onward. At 23 years old, I walked away from my family with no idea where I would go. It felt like a death, like I'd been cut adrift from everything I'd ever known. I remember the hot summer air on my face and the sting of tears in my eyes as I headed down the sidewalk, alone. The next few weeks passed in a blur of couches, cheap motels, and odd jobs. My best friend from high school, Ryan, practically saved my life that first night. I showed up at his apartment after dark, shaking and red-eyed, and he didn't ask any questions, just pulled me into a hug and said I could crash as long as I needed. I don't know how long I cried in his arms that night, but by morning I knew I couldn't lean on him forever. For 2 months I scraped by on any work I could find, washing dishes at a Greasy Spoon diner, walking dogs for a shelter, even hauling bricks at a construction site. I spent my nights on Ryan's couch when I could, and in the cheapest motel I could find when I couldn't. It was exhausting, but the non-stop grind kept me from drowning in my thoughts. When you're scrubbing plates or lugging cinder blocks under the hot sun, you're too tired to feel much of anything. Still, when I did think, lying on a lumpy motel mattress in the dark, I felt a pain so deep I didn't know if it would ever go away. I replayed that day in my childhood home over and over, wondering how things could have gone so horribly wrong. How could the people who loved me toss me aside like that? The anger and hurt were my constant companions, pushing me onward even when I thought I had nothing left. Eventually, I caught a break. A warehouse on the outskirts of town was hiring, and I landed a full-time job on the loading docks. The work was hard and dirty. I spent long days hauling boxes and driving forklifts. But it was steady. With that paycheck, I managed to rent a tiny bedroom in a drafty old house shared with 2 other warehouse workers. It wasn't much, just 4 walls big enough for a mattress and a lamp, but it was mine. I remember lying on that mattress my first night, staring at the ceiling and feeling the first glimmer of something like hope. 3 years passed. In that time, I worked and worked and worked. I became tougher, independent, someone my family would hardly recognize. I rose to shift supervisor at the warehouse within a year, after proving I could handle long hours and responsibility. I even started taking online courses in business management on the side, chipping away toward a future I was still trying to envision for myself. I even made a few good friends at work and in my house. We'd have a beer after a long shift or watch a football game on TV to unwind. It wasn't the future I once imagined, but it was honest and it was mine. But at night, alone in the dark, I still lay awake with the weight of what I'd lost pressing on my chest. In my dreams, I'd find myself back in my parents' house, or see Gemma's face, and I'd wake up with tears in my eyes. Holidays were the hardest. Even years later, the sight of families gathering or the sound of Christmas music in a store could reduce me to tears. I spent some holidays with Ryan's family or working extra shifts to distract myself, but the ache of missing my own family always caught up to me eventually. That bitter resentment in me only grew with time. I tended it like a dark little fire, fueling it with every memory of my parents' disappointed eyes and my sister's cold accusations. Anger was easier to hold on to than grief. It kept me upright on the days I wanted to collapse. For 3 years, I had no contact with my family. They tried in the beginning, they tried. Mom left me voicemails, her voice breaking as she begged me to please come home so we can talk. Dad sent a few terse texts asking if I was okay and then demanding I do the right thing. I never responded. Gemma even showed up at the warehouse where I worked, lingering beyond the fence with a desperate look on her face. Our eyes met across the distance. After a moment, I turned away and left her standing there. I just couldn't face her. Not then. Eventually, all of them stopped trying. I told myself I didn't need them anyway. I had gotten this far on my own. But some nights, when I saw a father and daughter laughing in a grocery store or a sister and brother teasing each other on the street, I felt that hollow ache open up inside me again. I missed them. God help me, I missed all of them, even Gemma. But I didn't know if I could ever forgive them. That was my life for 3 years. Work, sleep, endure. I thought that chapter was closed. Until that email arrived. One cool autumn morning, I was sipping instant coffee at the kitchen table before work when I noticed a new message on my phone. The sender's name made my heart skip, Dad. The subject line read, "We need to talk." My hands went clammy. I hesitated a long time before opening it. When I finally did, my breath caught in my throat. Dad asked me to meet him and Mom as soon as possible. It was about the ring. They had found it. I sat there rereading those words, my mind reeling. The ring had been found. Found. My innocence, proven. A fierce tremor ran through me, equal parts triumph and rage. They knew. They finally knew I hadn't lied. After 3 damn years. I realized I was shaking. A strangled sob caught somewhere between my chest and my throat. I clapped a hand over my mouth and let out a sound that was half laugh, half cry. Vindication tasted sweet for 1 second, and then the bitterness flooded in. All that time, all that pain, and it had been for nothing. They threw me away for nothing. I didn't respond to the email immediately. I paced my tiny kitchen, heart pounding, arguing with myself. Part of me wanted to ignore it, the way I'd ignored every other message from them. Let them suffer in uncertainty the way I had. But another part, the part that still dreamed of them, that still woke up some mornings disoriented and longing for home, whispered that maybe this was it. The chance to get answers. Maybe even a chance to get back a piece of what I'd lost. In the end, curiosity and that buried longing won out over my pride. With trembling hands, I dialed my father's number, something I hadn't done in 3 years. He picked up on the second ring. Ellie? Dad's voice. I had to close my eyes. I'd forgotten how comforting and infuriating that voice could sound. It was thicker now, like he might be holding back tears. I got your email, I said, forcing steel into my tone. Pumpkin, he began, using the old nickname reflexively. He caught himself. I'm so glad you called. Just tell me. I cut in my words sharp. I needed to hear him say it. The ring. You said it's been found. A shaky exhale crackled through the phone. Yes, it was found. Just a few days ago. Honey, it was in the kitchen sink's drain. Wedged in the pipe all this time. I went very still. My mind conjured an image of that day. Gemma washing dishes, setting her ring on the counter. The ring teetering and sliding, plunking into the drain without anyone noticing. Lost, but not stolen. Dad kept talking, words tumbling out in a rush. The garbage disposal started acting up, so we had a plumber in. He took apart the U-pipe and, well, he pulled out the ring. It must have gotten knocked down the drain that day. God, Ellie, it's been there all along. I realized I was gripping the edge of the counter with my free hand to steady myself. I pressed the phone harder to my ear, scarcely breathing. Gemma realized what happened and she told us everything, Dad went on. She's devastated. We all are. We're his voice broke, so sorry, Ellie. We know we can't undo what we did to you. But please, we want to see you. To beg your forgiveness, if that's what it takes. Please, will you meet with us? Silence hung on the line. I was afraid if I spoke, I might scream or sob or both. My vindication was right there. You see, I wasn't a liar, I wasn't a thief, but it didn't erase the hurt. Nothing could give me back those 3 years. Please, Dad whispered again. I found my voice though it cracked. I'll think about it. Then I hung up, unable to say anything more. It took 2 days and a lot of soul-searching, but I finally agreed to meet them. I figured I at least deserved to hear their explanations face to face. Closure one way or another. We chose a small coffee shop in a town about 30 miles from home. Neutral ground. I arrived early and grabbed a secluded booth in the corner. My leg jiggled uncontrollably under the table as I waited, my stomach doing flips. I didn't know if I was more afraid they'd show up or that they wouldn't. They showed up. The bell over the cafe door jingled and there they were, clustered together and looking around anxiously. Mom spotted me first. Our eyes met, and she brought a trembling hand to her mouth. In a heartbeat, she was rushing over. I stood up just as she reached me. Ellie, oh honey, her voice broke, and suddenly she was wrapping me in a hug. I went rigid, surprised by the contact. We hadn't touched in 3 years. She pulled back quickly when she felt me stiffen, searching my face with damp eyes. You're really here, she whispered, cupping my cheek before letting her hand fall. Dad was right behind her. He halted a foot away, as if unsure he was allowed any closer. His eyes were red, the lines on his face deeper than I remembered. Pumpkin, he said softly, almost reverently. Gemma stood a step behind them, twisting her fingers together. The last time I'd seen my sister up close, her face was contorted in anger. Now she just looked wrung out and fragile, like a little girl who'd been crying for days. Maybe we should sit, I muttered. My voice sounded oddly calm, even detached. Everyone nodded and shuffled into the booth. Mom and Dad sat opposite me. Gemma slid in next to them on the end. For a second we were all just staring at each other, the silence heavy with 1,000 unsaid things. Mom broke the silence first. You look well, she managed, wiping at her eyes and trying to smile. I'm okay, I replied quietly. It was the truth, at least on the surface. Dad cleared his throat, but when he spoke his voice still wavered. Ellie, we are so sorry. He leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly together on the table. We failed you as parents. We've regretted it every single day since that awful time. Mom nodded, tears spilling freely. Not a day went by that I didn't pray you'd come home, she whispered. I kept your room exactly how you left it, hoping maybe we'd get the chance to make this right. She swallowed hard, her chin trembling. We were so wrong, and we hurt you so terribly. I am so sorry, honey. Hearing my mother's voice crack and my father's earnest remorse was almost surreal. I had imagined this scenario so many times, but in my imagination I always shouted at them, unleashed all the pain and rage I'd been carrying. Instead, I just sat there, hands clenched in my lap, feeling like I might shatter. Gemma wiped her eyes. I don't even know where to start, she said in a broken whisper. What I did to you, it's unforgivable. I accused you of something horrible and convinced myself it was true. I was so caught up in my own stress and problems that I lost sight of reality and took it out on you. Deep down I knew you would never do something like that, but I still did it. And then I was too cowardly and ashamed to face you after I ruined everything. I will never forgive myself for that. She looked at me with red, pleading eyes. I always looked up to you, she continued, voice trembling. Even though you're my little sister, I admired you. And I repaid you by throwing you away. I am so sorry, Ellie. If you can ever find it in your heart to forgive me, I promise I will spend the rest of my life trying to be the sister you deserve. Her words hung in the air, desperate and sincere. I realized I'd been holding my breath. Slowly, I exhaled and tried to steady the whirlwind of emotions inside me. Thank you, I said softly, my voice shaking. All of you, thank you for saying that. A tear slipped down my cheek and I brushed it away quickly. I need you to know how badly you hurt me. These last 3 years. My voice broke despite my efforts to keep it level. They were hell. I had nothing. No one. I needed my family and you weren't there. Because you didn't believe me. Mom sobbed openly into her crumpled tissue. Dad looked like someone had driven a knife into his chest. Gemma was quietly crying too, each of them wearing matching expressions of grief and shame. I swallowed, gathering courage to continue. I hear what you're saying. And I believe you're sorry. But I can't pretend everything's fine now. I can't just come home for Sunday dinners and hug it out. I'm not ready to forgive. Not yet. A heavy silence followed. Mom nodded through her tears, a look of deep sadness on her face but also understanding. Dad bowed his head. We understand, he said, his voice rough. We don't expect anything from you, Ellie. We just want you back in our lives, even if it's only a little bit, even if it takes a long time for you to trust us again. We'll do whatever it takes, Mom added. Anything. You set the pace, sweetheart. Across the table, Gemma wiped her nose and whispered, I'll wait as long as I have to. I hope someday I can be your sister again. My throat ached. Despite the agony they'd put me through, despite my lingering anger, I still loved these people. That love warred mightily with my hurt and caution. I gave a small nod. All right. We can try. Slowly. Mom let out a shaky breath of relief, pressing her hands together like she was praying. Dad managed a smile that looked a bit like the one he used to give when I'd bring home a decent report card, proud and grateful. Gemma closed her eyes like she'd just heard the word, not guilty in a courtroom. By the time we left the cafe, we were all emotionally drained. Mom wanted to hug me goodbye, but I held up a hand and instead offered a brief, awkward squeeze of her arm. I'm sorry, I'm just not ready yet, I murmured. The flicker of hurt in her eyes was quickly masked with a nod. It's okay, she said, though her voice trembled. Dad patted my shoulder gently, which I allowed. Thank you for meeting us, he said. We won't let you down again. Gemma hung back as our parents stepped away. She looked at me like she wanted to say something more, but all that came out was a choked, thank you, Ellie, before she hurried after Mom and Dad. I stood on the sidewalk and watched them walk to their car. Mom was clinging to Dad's arm, and Gemma was holding herself, shoulders hunched. In a strange way, they looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I had grown. That night, I stared at my ceiling for hours, torn between love and anger. In the end, I knew I wasn't ready to forgive or forget. Not yet. A few days later, I called my parents. I explained that while I was willing to try to rebuild a relationship, it would have to be slowly on my terms. I wasn't moving back home, and I couldn't jump straight to happy family gatherings as if nothing had happened. They would have to earn back my trust, and that would take time. Mom and Dad, choking up as they spoke, said they understood. They promised to respect my boundaries and were grateful I was giving them any chance at all. I kept my distance from Gemma for the time being. She reached out. Oh, did she reach out? The day after our meeting, she sent me a long text pouring out her soul, apologizing again and saying she'd wait forever if she had to. I replied with only a few words. I need more time. She didn't push after that, apart from a simple "I understand" in return. In the weeks that followed, my parents and I maintained careful contact. Mom called me every Sunday, and though the first few calls were painfully awkward, they gradually grew more natural as we stuck to safe, familiar topics. Dad sent occasional emails with little updates or links to articles he thought I'd like, just as he used to. I responded in small ways, letting them back into my life inch by inch. I also started therapy during this time. Talking to a counselor helped me make sense of the tangle of emotions inside me. I realized the ring incident had been the breaking point of issues that ran deeper. In therapy, I also confronted how I'd always felt in Gemma's shadow growing up. That understanding didn't excuse what happened, but it helped me start to heal. My therapist reminded me that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing not to let anger consume me. She encouraged me to move at my own pace, and I did. Meanwhile, friends like Ryan stood by me every step of the way. They reminded me that family can also be the people who never left my side. With their support, I slowly learned to let some of the bitterness go. Months went by. True to form, my parents respected my boundaries. They didn't show up unannounced or pressure me for more than I could give. Our weekly calls became a routine. I found myself even looking forward to updating Mom about little things at work or telling Dad about a book I was reading. The wounds were far from healed, but each tentative exchange was like a small stitch binding us back together. About 6 months later, I received a job offer that felt like a dream come true, a management position at a large logistics company in another state. It was a huge step up in my career. I was thrilled, but also anxious about putting more distance between me and my family, just as we were cautiously rebuilding trust. My therapist reminded me I needed to live my own life, so I accepted the offer. Telling my parents about the move was difficult. They were proud of me, but I saw tears in Mom's eyes as she realized I'd soon be farther away. She admitted she had hoped for more time with me nearby. Dad stayed stoic, simply hugging me and saying, "You'll do great, pumpkin," though his voice was thick with emotion. I reassured them I'd visit for holidays and that we'd keep talking often. They tried to smile and be strong, promising their support despite their sadness. Naturally, news of my impending move reached Gemma as well. A day later, as I was packing boxes, I heard a knock on my door. I opened it to find Gemma standing there, eyes red and filled with worry. It was the first time she'd ever visited my place. For a moment, we just stared at each other. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. I stepped aside, and she took in the half-packed boxes scattered around. Fresh tears brimmed in her eyes. "So it's true," she whispered. "You're leaving." I said, folding a towel and placing it in a box. "It's a great opportunity for me, Gemma. But I'm not disappearing forever. We can still talk." "But will we?" she interrupted, voice trembling. "You barely talk to me now. I'm scared once you're gone, I'll lose you all over again." I felt a pang in my chest. I gestured for her to sit with me on the small sofa. "I know I've kept my distance," I said softly. "I needed to. But moving away doesn't mean I want to cut you out. It just means I have to do something for myself." Gemma nodded, wiping her face. "I understand." "I do. Her composure crumbled and a sob escaped her. "I'm so sorry, Ellie. I've said it 1,000 times, but I need you to believe it. If I could take it all back, trade places with you, anything, I would. I love you, and I hate that my mistake cost me my sister." My eyes stung. I reached over and held her hand. "I know you're sorry. And I forgive you." The words came out in a whisper, but I realized they were true. Maybe not completely, not for every sleepless night or lonely holiday, but I forgave her enough to let the past start to rest. "I've missed you, Gem," I admitted, voice shaky. "I miss having my sister." She let out a small, broken laugh of relief and squeezed my hand. "I've missed you too. You have no idea." We sat there with tears in our eyes, tentative smiles breaking through, truly talking for the first time in years. When Gemma finally stood to leave, she surprised me by throwing her arms around me. This time, I hugged her back, both of us clinging on a second longer than we probably meant to. "Please take care of yourself out there," she murmured. "I will, I promised. You take care too. And we'll talk soon, okay?" She nodded, a hopeful glint in her eyes. The day I packed up my car and prepared to move, my family came to see me off. Mom fussed over me, filling a cooler with sandwiches for the drive and triple-checking that I had everything I needed. Dad gave me a long, tight hug and told me how proud he was. Gemma pressed a small keychain into my hand, a silver pendant engraved with "Drive Safe." She managed a teary laugh as she said, "Now you have to come back to return this." I actually laughed with her, hugging her one more time. As I finally pulled away from the curb, I looked in the rearview mirror. My parents and sister stood together in front of my apartment building, watching me go. I could see Mom wiping her eyes on Dad's shoulder, and Gemma lifting a hand in a wave. I raised my hand out the window in return and kept driving. With each mile I put between me and that little Ohio town, I felt a mix of emotions swirling inside me. I was nervous, of course I was, but also optimistic. In my mirror, I watched the town grow smaller, and with it the shadows of everything that had happened there. Somewhere back on those familiar streets were the people I loved, the people I'd found again after thinking they were lost to me forever. We still had a long way to go, but we had a chance. I faced forward toward the open road. 3 years ago, a false accusation shattered my world, but I survived and rebuilt my life from nothing. Now I was driving into a new chapter, one I earned on my own. Whatever came next, I knew I was going to be okay.